Siri, buongiorno, assalamu alaikum. It's a pity that I can't remember Navajo a way of greetings. It's a pity that I can't remember that. But welcome to Nevertheless Commentaries. I am your host, Sipondlo of Sipon Sports, if you're at Ank on the net. Today we are doing 40 days of 40 cultures and 40 languages. So it's 40 cultures, 40 languages in 40 days. Today is day 4. We are doing the INCAS from South America, in Peru to be specific. So it's one of the cultures in South America. We are about to find out the world history according to the INCAS. So yeah, tomorrow we be, if I had time tomorrow, we'd do Asia, Urdu from Pakistan. That's where we're gonna go when we first stop when we go to Asia. But today we are in Peru, South America with the INCAS. Now the INCAS originated as a small tribe in highlands of Peru. The INCAS again, the INCAS originated as a small tribe in the highlands of Peru. Now, establishing their capital in Cusco around the 12th century, with the founders like Menko Kapak leading them from a mythical homeland, Pakarutampu, to settle there. From this base, they gradually expanded through conquest of an alliance, growing from a small kingdom into a vast Inca empire, the largest in the Americas, by conquering the neighboring peoples and controlling the territory from the modern-day Ecuador to Chile by the 15th and the 16th century. So this is very, very important, because now we see that these people, actually the Incas, are the founding base of these two countries that we know today by the name of Ecuador to Chile, which was happened in the 15th and the 16th century. So now we have a short video that provides a short history of the Inca Empire before we continue with everything that we are learning with these people. It's the rise and fall of the Inca Empire.
The area they inhabited was often quite harsh. The Inca usually...
Hold on, lady.
Do you know that the Inca had one of the most sophisticated road networks and messenger systems in history? Stick around to learn all about the Inca civilization. Hello and welcome to World History Encyclopedia. My name is Kelly, and in today's video we are going to explore the history of the Inca civilization. Don't forget, the easiest way to support us is by giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel and hitting the bell icon for notifications so you don't miss out on our new videos every Tuesday and Friday.
Who were the Incas?
The Inca civilization flourished in Peru and surrounding areas between 1400 and 1533 CE. Prior to the Inca being dominant in West and South America, the Chimu occupied the area until 1470, when the Inca defeated them. The Inca, who started as a small settlement in Cusco, ended up expanding along the Andes and the Pacific South Coast, as far north as Quito in modern-day Ecuador, and as far south as Santiago de Chile, which made it the largest empire in the Americas at that time. Although the environment of the Andes, which was the area they inhabited, was often quite harsh, the Inca utilized the natural landscape to construct mountaintop settlements, complex road networks, and terraces and canals for diverting and moving water. Their most famous site today is the ruins of Machu Picchu, but the capital city of the Inca civilization was Cusco.
Okay. According to Kelly here, she shows a beautiful ruins, beautiful site of Machu Picchu. It's so beautiful that I want to go there. Machu Picchu. The scenery is is next level type thing. So now if you like peace, the mountain areas, the rivers, you want to go and visit that place.
Spread throughout their empire along their sophisticated messaging system, but more on that later. For the Incas, the world was made by the creator god, Viracocha, who emerged from Lake Titicaca. Viracocha created a race of giants, but he found them too large, so he destroyed them and made humans on a smaller scale, as well as creating the sun, the moon, and the stars. After creating humans and leading the founding couple to Cusco to live and teaching the people civilized arts, he walked across the sea to the west and promised that one day his messengers would return. The Inca believed they were all descended from the sun god, Inti, who was also among the most important gods in their pantheon, and also believed their ancestors emerged from places in the natural landscape, such as a tree or a spring, known as pacarinas. There was no difficulty in reconciling the belief in the sun as people's origin with the earthly one as descending from a tree, because all things were considered part of the divine. The Incas were polytheistic, and their deities dwelt in one of three realms: the Hanin Pacha, which was the upper realm, and home to Inti, the sun god, and the moon goddess and sister to Inti, Kira. The middle world, or Pacha, which was the home to humans, animals, and vegetation, and Buku Pacha, the underworld, and overseen by Supe, the god of death. They believed that the natural world was controlled by the gods, and so their belief in the gods informed their daily lives significantly. In the Inca religion, there were 3 rules which were considered a single rule: do not steal, do not lie, do not be lazy. And if you followed this rule after you died, you would go to the upper realm, also known as the land of the sun. If you didn't follow these rules, you would go to the underworld after you died, where it was always cold and your soul would be lonely forever in eternal darkness. Bleak, I know. The souls who were neither perfect nor terrible in life would get to go back and have another chance at life, trying again and again until they got life right. The Inca also practiced mummification and buried their dead with grave goods, but instead of placing the corpse lying down, the mummies were buried sitting up.
Now, as I'm actually reading these or studying these Inca people from Peru, which probably is the modern day Chile, Ecuador, they began around the 13th century. So that's recent, if you ask me. But I'm hoping that, like Navajo people, they will take me back to beyond that, earlier than that. But looking at their belief system and with how their religion is structured, you could see that they have an influence of the Egyptians. So they draw back from Africa. They draw from Africa. Looking at, they believe in a sun god. That's Egyptian. They believe in a god of death. That also sounds more Egyptian mythology. They mummify their dead. That's Egyptian also. So you see the similarities and the comparison between these two cultures, the Egyptian methodology and also the Incas belief system and religion. So there are many similarities between these two tribes or these two people. But since this culture began in the 13th century, AD, it may happen that these people traveled from Africa and made it to somehow to South America and actually form this actually particular tribe. I'm not sure it's what I'm getting from what I've studied so far as the Incas people are concerned, but there's too many similarities between them and the Egyptian. I mean ancient Egyptians, not the Egyptians that we see today, because that's another story for another day, looking at the Egypt of what it is today compared to what it was back in the days. Having studied the Arab conquest, on what happened after Muhammad, the messenger of God, you know that there's so many movements that happened during that era, and Egypt is one of those places where there were mass movement of people, the original Egyptians, and then the settlers, the new settlers, as we know them as Egyptians today, replaced them. But that's a study of another day. We will look at that in the near future. But there are a lot of similarities with the Perus and the Egyptian people, Egyptians of the past. But we will see, can it be the fact that during that era of the Arabic conquest, it's the time where this movement happened, because it happened around the 8th century AD. Can it happen that that movement from the Middle East translated to the people who moved to the South America and actually formed this tribe or this culture or these people which are known as INCAS, who were actually landed in Peru? But you look at the fact that they're building their homestead in the mountains, top of the mountain, and you look at their structure, how they build their structure, they're similar like the pyramids of Giza. So there's actually some connection between this tribe of Incas and also the ancient Egyptian people. And speaking about building houses in the mountains, the Nguni people, when first came to the south, which are our great ancestors, they built their houses in the mountains. Why they build their houses in the mountains? First of all, the higher you go, the cooler it becomes. So for fresh breath, you need to be a little bit higher up the field. But at the same time, there were people who actually live off of crops. There were people who actually believed in agriculture and live off of that, and also had a lot of cattle, goats, and sheep. So it made sense that they built their houses or huts in the upper mountains, so that the fields were reserved for actually planting the crops, were reserved for agriculture, vegetation, and also some were reserved for the cattle and goats and the sheep and everything else. So there's a little bit of correlation between these people and actually original Egyptians. So leave the fact that I've added the Ngunis, because we also came from the north. Lord knows how long we've been traveling from the north until we made it to the south, as we are South Africans today. But if you look at history somehow, you'll find out that it all boils down to this one area, which is the Middle East, where everything actually, where there's a boiling pot, where you find the branch out of the Asians, the Europeans, and the Africans. And now lately I've recognized that even the Americans comes from this same pot, because I've struggled to find anything that's originally American, but it all traces back to the same boiling pot. As I see these Incas people, they have too much similarities with the ancient Egyptians. So I think this actually plays to the fact or to the idea that life began in Africa. Maybe that's that. So if life began in Africa, everybody needs to come back home. Everybody needs to come back home. We actually need to start developing our home and make it a better place. We've spread out all over the world to build these great empires, these new civilizations, and everything that's been happening all over the world, but home. Maybe it's time now we resuscitate, is that a word? Resuscitate what's been there and dig deeper and see if we can actually find the geniuses who can replicate what's been happening in the past and actually the reemergence of the past civilizations may actually start to occur. But yeah, that might make sense to it. Let's continue.
Why Inca practiced this method of burial is still unclear. The Inca Empire was huge, and at its height, it reached over 4,000 kilometers, or 2,500 miles. With this in mind, how did they keep that whole territory in order? The government of the Inca Empire and central power was focused at their capital city, Cusco, and this centralized government ended up being in charge of over 10 million subjects who spoke over 30 languages. And to manage that kind of scope, they had around 40,000 Inca governors. When the Inca conquered a group, they would impose their administration, religion, and even their art onto the conquered regions. And while they received tribute from these peoples and integrated them into their empire, the Inca would provide them with food, better storage facilities, military assistance, luxury goods, and access to the roads and state-sponsored religious festivals. The Inca had a king known as the Sapa Inca, which means unique Inca, who was the absolute ruler and considered divine and a living legitimizing the Inca divine right of rule. The king was in charge of politics, society, the food stores of the empire, and was even the commander-in-chief of the army. The king would marry on his accession to the throne, with his wife sometimes being his own sister. The queen, or Koya, was known as Mamad Gik, our mother, and held some power over her husband via her kin group, especially when it came to selecting which son would be the heir. At the top of the ruling hierarchy, just below the king, was his high priest, Lilak Umu, and 10 royal kindred groups of nobles called Panaka. Below them was another 10 kindred groups, and below them another 10. Then at the bottom of the administration were the locally recruited administrators who looked over the settlements, and the smallest Andean population unit known as the Ailu, which was a collection of households, which was often a group of related families who lived together, worked an area of land, and Ailu was governed by a small number of nobles, or curakas, a role which could include women. The local administrators would report to a group of around 80 regional level administrators, and they would report to the 4 administrators of the 4 quarters of the empire, who in turn would report to the king. As you might have already noticed, it was an intricate affair, and it needed to be in order for such a large empire to be successfully governed. Although super intricate, it was an incredibly efficient system, and information travelled quite quickly as it was passed down through the layers of administrations, and this process was aided by the sophisticated roads constructed by the Inca. The network of roads covered over 40,000 kilometres or 25,000 miles within their territory, which made it easier to move goods to trade with the use of llamas, since they didn't have wheeled vehicles, as well as easy movement for armies and administrators. Also along these roads lived pairs of messengers, whose entire responsibility was to receive and then deliver messages, and they lived in pairs, so while one slept, the other was awake to deliver the messages. There were stations, inns, and storage depots along this roadway to supply troops, give travellers a rest, and maintain those who worked for the messenger systems. And now, imagine getting all this done without writing anything down. The Inca didn't develop an alphabet or a writing system, but what they did develop was a sophisticated system of record keeping called a kipu.
Now that's another aspect. That's another aspect, because in Africa it was the same system. We did not even develop a language after the fall of the Egyptian Empire, and could I call it segregation? Maybe, but when our great grand ancestors descended from Egypt to the south, they did not actually see the importance of writing anymore, simply because the culture was stolen based off of documents. Now, the culture was stolen based off of documents that were found in the first, or in the kingdoms that were in place at that time. Could it be of the Kush or Kushites? Could it be of the Egyptians? Could it be the one that was in Zimbabwe? Could it be the one that was in Central Africa and also Egypt? But those documents, the civilization that was found there, it was stolen. So it's easy to steal the information if it's documented or if it's written down. So they chose to actually use oral communication. So people had to be quick-witted and have to have a great memory to actually pass a message from one person to the next person without changing a word. Now, if a convoy is sent, the message cannot be lost along the way. The convoy will rather die rather than actually disclosing that message to a wrong person. So that's the manner at which they try to actually protect the messaging or the culture or the civilization as they build or rebuild the new cultures going down to the south. So looking at the Incas, I think they use the same system. Let's actually quantify the fact that these guys were from Egypt also. It quantified the fact that they no longer needed to write anything down and form any form of a document or any written language because it can be stolen. They rather use verbal communication. So the envoys were very, very important in this instance, and they were to be the sharpest people in the society, people who can actually listen, hear, and then transport the message as is to the next person. So I think it was smart, but not as smart at the same time, because there's so much that has been lost at the same time, because everything that we know today, it could be mathematics, it could be science, it could be medicine, it's usually appear as if it was developed somewhere else, whereas it is African legacy. It's from Egypt, basically. And who were the Egyptians at the time? That's another question, that's another discussion on its own. But the written information usually get lost. Specifically, if people would come and take all these documents and actually burn the place down, then there's nothing left. There's nothing left. They took everything, and everything that was left, it was burned to the ground. Then the civilization is doomed. Now, after they've experienced that with Egypt, and possibly the Kemet people decided, no, we're no longer going to actually create any documents. Hence, when it comes to African medicine and traditional healers, there's nothing written down on a document. It's all spiritual. It's all spiritual. They receive the healing guidance from the spirit world and actually applies it to the sick to heal them. There's nothing written down because they've seen it at the first hand, everything being stolen right under our king's nose, and the civilization fell. So looking at the INCAS people adopting the same strategy of not formulating any written word or documents, it actually plays to the fact that these people might also be from Africa, particularly in Egypt, or in the ancient Egypt as we know it. And you could see that the structures that they built resembles the Pyramid of Giza. That's the same thing that you see across Africa. If you see how they build their houses, especially the rondavels, how these rondavels are built, they assemble the pyramids of the Giza. You could see that this was actually the manner at which our great ancestors used to actually build, and they had some reasons why they built houses in that manner, and also why the pyramids of Giza still stands today, built in that manner. They usually used carved stones, and actually built from just stones. And some stones, you just ask yourself, how did people, if there were no machinery, how did people or human beings lift a ton of rocks on top of one another, building a structure? Those are the things that we haven't actually find answers to today, because everybody has dispersed from the homeland to either build in the east, it either could be the Qing or Qing dynasty, or in China, that is, or they are in America or in Europe, but home. But at the same time, there's the factor that you need to see on the slave trade. Because these people have stolen the documents from the Egypt to actually start these civilizations on new territories, they couldn't build those things. They had the documents, but they couldn't build those. They couldn't engineer. They couldn't replicate the same civilization, the same structures. They had to come back in Africa and get Africans to actually go into these places and actually build these civilizations. So every civilization you know up to this far was built by black people, Africans, those who were in original Egypt. Everywhere you go, you'd find out that those cities, those structures were built by them on slavery. They weren't paid for that. So those are the things that we are not ready to speak about or to communicate about, but those are the facts. Well, we are not spreading hate to nobody. It's part of the history. Sometimes history hurts, but it's part of history. We need to make peace with that and actually accept that, okay, that's where we come from, and how do we build from that moving forward. But having not written anything actually costs a lot of a generation, a lot of information, because some of us are very, very lost because there's nothing written down in a document that preserved history and where we come from. Because our great ancestors saw that was actually risky. They didn't want to actually repeat the same mistake. I see the same pattern with the Incas people in Peru, which actually confirms the fact that they're from Africa as well. Hi, I'm new. My name is Angelina. Angelina Lavi, what's good? What's good, Angelina? This is Nevertheless Commentary. I'm your host, Sipoli of Zibon Sport, your favorite Ank on the net, the black Italian himself, all the way from South Africa. This is a sport channel basically, but once, probably twice in a week, we do a language and a culture. So we dedicated this time for 40 languages, 40 cultures in 40 days. So today is day 4. We're dealing with Incas people from Peru in South America. Yesterday we were doing with the Novak people from North America. The other day it was Arabic. We started with the Italian. So tomorrow we are going to East in the Asia. I think we'll do the Urdu from Pakistan. La from South Africa. Where about in South Africa, Angelina? I'm in Pietermaritzburg, KwaZulu-Natal. Where are you joining us from in South Africa? So I've been seeing these similarities. There are a lot of similarities with the Incas people from Peru or South America, how they structured their empire and the patterns or the behavior of the people compared to the African people who were descending from Egypt all the way down to the south, as today we are South African. Angelina also is from Western Cape, somewhere around Cape Town. I don't know which part of Western Cape is she from, but before we come here, there were a lot of developments that happened along the way. One of them was being not recording anything on a document, because that can be stolen and used against you. That's what they saw on the first civilization in Egypt, hence they descended down the Kemet people. So thank you for the love, Angelina. So that's about it. So today our focus is on South America, Incas, but I just can't help myself but to draw these comparisons, because there's a lot of comparisons between these people and African people. So I really love them, and I think in future I will really love to actually go and see these ruins, these structures of their past civilizations, and also study the history of them from their own people. Because it's one thing to learn about them on the internet, and it's one thing to also learn from them in person. So I'm very intrigued to actually go to South America, Peru, Ecuador, Chile, to actually learn about the Incasa people. Maseko Pros, bro. Are you sick? I'm not sick, bro. I'm not sick. I'm okay. I'm 100%. Why are you asking if I'm sick, bro? So those are similarities that I was drawing. It's the burial first, and the structures that they build, and how they send the messages from one part of the kingdom to the next without writing any documents. But they said they are sending an envoy who specifically heard and is going to translate that message as is, and it will not get lost. It will not be intercepted. You rather kill the envoy, because there's nothing you're going to get from him. I think these people were also trained so hard, intense training, to make sure that they do not break, even under the harsh torture, because you know how civilization were forged. So if you catch an envoy, you want to torture them to actually find out some of the information that you need as far as their kingdom is concerned. Let's actually try and infiltrate it from the information you've got from these envoys. But since there were no document or written documents, it was actually easy to give out this messaging. Makubi, fun fact, the Baloi clan's history says their ancestors come from Egypt, and the Ethiopians and the Sudan side, Kush. Not only the Balois, bro, not only the Balois. I think the entire Nguni tribe comes from the Kush land. So, and as I've been actually studying these people, these languages, you could see that there are traces from that area. It's either in the African part or in the southern Asian part, or in the western Asia part, in the Middle East. Let me say that, in the Middle East. So I love your eyes. Oh, thank you, Angelina. Thank you, thank you. So now let's continue. But I can't help but see these comparisons. So I'm very, very intrigued to actually see the INCAS people in the future.
Akipu used colourful knotted strings to signify certain information. But what that information was...
Now, the quipu is sort of a bracelet. Sort of a bracelet. Now, if you know the Zulu culture, there's this thing that is put by the virgin girls around the neck that is made of beard. Now, the quipu is exactly that, but it's made of just pure strands of cotton.
Is still unknown. Interestingly, there was also no currency in the Inca Empire, and things like taxation would have been paid in foodstuffs, precious metals, and textiles. Looking at the ruins of Inca sites, such as Machu Picchu, it's hard to believe that they were constructed without the use of wheels, steel tools, or mortar to stick the stones together. The Inca created these buildings out of such tightly shaped stones that even through earthquakes, the buildings stayed standing. The land which the Inca lived on was mountainous, but this did not stop them from constructing buildings, walls, and fortifications. The Inca created terraces in order to grow crops, and these terraces often included canals and underground water irrigation systems, which were also used for fountains. As part of their extensive road system was the suspension bridges, which connected parts of the Inca territory and were made out of woven fibers. This practice of constructing suspension bridges out of grass and woven fibers is still practiced today, even though there are metal bridges for cars. This refined fiber working, perfected by the Inca, was even used to construct boats. Inca were also known for their sophisticated...
There's another thing. I think we've lost a very, very important aspect as far as engineering is concerned. Now, if you look at how the Egyptians built the pyramids, and then look at how these people, the INCAS people, how they built their structures using rocks, and there's no clay in between or mud in between, it's just rocks stacked on top of the rocks, and they carved to actually fit the structure that they were building. I think we've lost something from that. I don't know how these people perfected that without machinery, but there's something that you could have learned from these people, or something that wasn't actually shared from generation to generation in that aspect. I think the documentation of things actually made us lose the type of engineering. And I think it's what we need today. Looking at the weather patterns that have shifted and changed so far, we need solid structures. And we've lost it. And even if you look at the roads that are built today, I will speak on roads in the perspective of being a South African, because I've only been in South Africa my entire existence. So 37 years of being in South Africa. So the road constructions that we have, you find that each and every year there's a construction on the highway. Especially, I'm always on the N3. There's always construction on the N3 throughout the year. Now that speaks to the fact that we've lost crucial knowledge as far as engineering is concerned. Because I don't believe that we should be focusing on building roads throughout the year for years. Somehow we should finish that and move on to the next thing, but we cannot, because there's always works that has to be done on the road. So that speaks to our engineering. It's not up to standard. And had we known, or had we learned from the ancient people, I think we would have been contracting way better roads than what we are doing right now. I understand that we have heavier motor vehicles that are on the road right now, which makes it easy to damage these roads, but we can actually always overcome that before we actually create the heavier motor vehicles, we should have actually anticipated that fact that this will be very damaging to the roads. How do we actually create roads that will actually be up to standard as far as the heavy motor vehicles are concerned? Now, if we weren't ready for that, we could have actually continued with the railway system, because I think South Africa was the number one in terms of railway system in the world. So we could have actually continued with that if we weren't ready with the heavy motor vehicles damaging the roads, and we are actually need to build throughout the years. So I think that's one aspect that actually held us back as far as the economy of South Africa is concerned. That's my opinion, though. I'm not saying it's the first, but I think that actually plays a role into that. But let's continue anyways. But we've lost something as far as technology and engineering is concerned, especially in building structures and the roads. I think we've lost something that we didn't learn from the past.
Artistic style, especially their textiles. They created highly polished metalwork out of precious materials such as gold and silver. The king lived in luxury and would drink out of gold and silver cups and wear silver on his feet. Gold was considered the sweat of the sun, and silver was the tears of the moon. And they created objects such as jewelry, figurines, ceremonial knives, and everyday objects for nobility. Ceramics were made out of clay by hand, since they didn't have potter's wheels, and they were decorated in abstract plants, zigzags, geometric shapes, and dots. In spite of these crafts, the Inca were most revered for their textiles. The finely worked and highly decorated textiles were signs of wealth and status, and the colours they used were from natural sources such as mollusks, minerals, plants, and insects. One of the most popular designs was the checkerboard, and one of the reasons for the repetition of designs was that pottery and textiles were often produced for the state as a tax, and so artworks were representative of specific communities and their cultural heritage, much like national currencies nowadays. In 1528, Francisco Pizarro and his partner Diego de Almagro were adventurers and treasure seekers looking for gold, since their companions found so much of it in Mexico from the Aztec world decades earlier. In 1528, the expedition's pilot, Bartolomé Ruiz, captured a raft off the coast which was filled with treasure. And so, with 168 men, 138 veterans, 27 cavalry and 1 friar, they set off for the Andes. Later, they got some reinforcements, which bumped their number up to 260, which includes 67 cavalry. And as they moved, they pillaged. They formed a settlement at San Miguel, and by the end of 1532, Pizarro was ready to make contact with the ruler of what seemed to be a large and wealthy empire. On November 15th, the Spaniards approached the Inca town of Cajamarca, and the king Atahualpa, who felt fairly safe surrounded by 80,000 of his men, agreed to meet.
Now, that's another thing. That's actually came into my attention as far as I'm doing this 40 languages, 40 cultures, and 40 days. Every time that there is going to be a fall of an empire, of the native people of the land, Europe is always at the forefront. Navajo people from North America, who actually descended from Canada and also, what is this place? Alaska, descended to the southwestern part of America. Upon their destruction, the Spanish was involved. So the end of the empire, the Europeans were involved. Now it is the same thing with the INCAS people here. They are thriving, they are free people, they are good in trading, they are living their own lives freely. All of a sudden, Spanish arrived. And then it's the end of the empire. It's the end of the empire. So there's something about Europe that is not good. There's something about Europe that is not good. And throughout the course of history, Europeans have been disrupting the lives of the people. I'm not sure if Europeans are ready to actually speak about that, but they have been a cause of the fall of many empires. because they search for treasure. How do you search for treasure? By killing people who actually owns that treasure. It's part of their wealth. Why don't you trade with them? Why killing them? In North America, it was European, the Spanish people who destroyed the Navajo tribe. Now the INCAS is the same people. So Europeans are always involved in the fall of these civilizations. But I'm not sure if Europeans are ready to actually have a discussion as far as that is concerned.
After the formal meeting with speeches and drinks, the next day Pizarro planned an ambush for when Atahualpa arrived in the square. It turned out that clubs, spears and arrows were no match for firearms, and Atahualpa was hit on the head and captured alive.
I've heard the story before. Actually, it was a story of not more than 200 years ago, here in South Africa. Yeah, there's a story that is told of Shaka Zulu, who was a warrior with a spear and a shield. And the spear was no match for a gun. The Inkasa people suffered the same fate. The spear was no match for a gun. Very, very familiar story.
Atahualpa continued to rule from captivity during the 8 months it took for the Inca to come up with the ransom Pizarro demanded, which was a room measuring 6.2 by 4.8 meters, filled with all the treasures the Incas could provide, up to a height of 2.5 meters. Then, even though he got his ransom, Pizarro killed Atahualpa anyway. Although the collapse of the Inca civilization is often credited to the Spanish, namely the conquistadors under Francisco Pizarro in 1533, the civilization was already in a state of decline prior to the arrival of the Spanish. This decline was caused by rebellions from the people they conquered, since the Inca forced their religion, art and taxes on them.
I don't believe that part of the story. I think that's part of the story that there was a decline in the civilization already. I think it was made to cover up the atrocity that the Spanish brought to these people, because they robbed them. They came in and make sure that they have them drunk, and then all of a sudden they shoot them. They collected all types of wealth that they needed in terms of gold and silver and killed their king anyways. Now, how will they actually rebuild the empire when their king has been slaughtered? Because if they slaughter the king, they become the kings. Now, I think it's almost sweat, but I think this is BS that the kingdom was on a decline. It was inserted to actually make it not so bizarre, the fact that they actually came here and annihilated this kingdom to actually rob them off of their gold and silver. And it actually could serve them better if they actually become the kings of these people. Conquistadors were ruthless, almost barbaric. That's correct, bro. That's correct. And the same story that is repeated all over the world. These are crimes against humanity. But after they've collected all the wealth from all over the world, now there's peace treaty. Actually, this is very, very...
As well as fighting within the empire and the decimation of up to 90% of the Inca population due to disease, most likely smallpox, brought to the Americas.
To be honest, I didn't know that I was going to be this upset actually going through this journey of 40 languages, 40 cultures in 40 days. But as Makubi is saying, this is barbaric. This is barbaric. I know that the modern day Europeans have nothing to do with this, but their ancestors, bro, were barbaric. As South Africans, we are still missing a few chiefs. That's correct, bro. That's correct. And everywhere they go, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. They got guns. They make sure that, okay, these people got spears. They are no match for us. Those heads were taken to England as a proof that they have actually conquered. A proud South African, Onakoyo Mayake. Onako Mayake, what's good, Onomayake? Welcome to the stream, bro. Welcome to the stream. I never understood that I would be this disturbed actually looking at this, because it has been a pattern. It has been a pattern. Not only because another thing that I've learned while I was doing the Arabic is the fact that also the Arabic derives or was formulated in Europe, and it conquest in the Middle East. So a lot of people actually leave their homeland because they were not ready to be converted into the Islamic religion. That's part of the things that were happening, that some people are not ready to speak about. They think it was a good, no, it wasn't a good thing. People were murdered, people were massacred, people were chased away from their land. People were, history was erased while they were still living. It's part of those things that I've learned while I was doing these 40 languages, 40 cultures in 40 days. And I've actually have been exposed to what the world has been, not what we are made to think it's been. There's always a European somehow involved. I don't know why I'm so mad right now, but what I see happens to these Peru people, the INCAS people, first it shows that they were from Africa. That means they suffered the second tragedy from the Europeans. First in Egypt, they moved south of Africa and then moved to Peru in South America, but they followed them there. After they've discovered the gold, the silver, and they've settled, they built a new civilization, they come again and annihilate them. This is sad, bro.
By the Spanish. So it's safe to say that if Pizarro hadn't come along and exploited the unrest already brewing in the population of the Inca, who saw their conquerors as oppressors, they would have eventually collapsed anyway. What form is...
That's BS. I'm sorry, Kelly, but what you're saying right now, that's BS. That's a cover-up of what truly happened. But I'll continue this anyways. But that stuff that the kingdom was on the decline, that BS.
May have taken can't really be guessed at, but it's a pretty good bet it wouldn't have involved the kind of cruelty and destruction.
She knows, her spirit actually, as she says this, that the kingdom was on the decline, you could see that she's all of a sudden uncomfortable. She's like blinking so many times, and a posture of actually protecting herself, because she could feel it in her spirit that the part that says the kingdom was on the decline before the Spanish arrived and actually robbed them is BS. Her spirit actually speaks a totally different thing from what she is pronouncing with her mouth. Damn.
Of the indigenous culture that resulted from the Spanish conquest of the 16th century. How much did you know about the Inca Empire before this video? And what did you find most interesting? Let us know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our new videos every Tuesday and Friday.
Okay, that was a short video, provides a short history of the Inca Empire. And I hate what I've heard. Some of the things that I've heard there are very, very disturbing because it's something that we know about. Some of the things that was said there is total BS. It's just lies. How many empires that's fallen in the hands of the Europeans, and there was a cover up? The kingdom was on a decline. The kingdom was on a decline when we arrived. We discovered South Africa. There were people in South Africa. How do you discover something where there's people living there? We discovered gold. We were making weapons off of those things. We were trading with that gold that we discovered. We discovered gold. How do you discover something that people are already using as a medium of transaction? Inca tradition links to their origin to the sun god, Inti. Now that's what I was saying, that this actually is parallel to the Egyptian methodology of when you look at the sun god. So they link their origin to the sun god who created first humans, who sent them to the lake Titicaca. The tribe led by a figure like Manco Capac migrated to Cusco, a fertile valley, and began building a society. Early rulers consolidated power by true imperial expansion began in 1438 under rulers like Pachacuti, who initiated a rapid conquest. Cusco became the heart of the empire, serving as a political, religious, and administrative center. Emperors Sapa Inca were seen as the descendants of the sun god, granting them the divine authority. Now, if you look at the Sapa Inca, you think about the pharaohs in Egypt. You think about the pharaohs. If they say the emperors of Sapa Inca were seen as a descendant of the sun god who granted them the divine authority, you definitely think about the Egyptians and their pharaohs. So, because we've been in this for 52 minutes, probably we've covered most of these things. Probably we'll need to actually learn a few words in Inca. Simple things like greeting, formalities, Chica, Hureko, what's good? Chica, what's good? So now, if you want to speak or the formalities of thank you for that message. It's very, very encouraging. Chikata Hurekochi. Now the formalities like greetings. If you want to say hello, you said Imeinalan, that's saying hello or how are you. If you are responding and you want to say I am fine, you say Alilanmi. So if somebody say Imeinalan, you say you respond by saying Alilanmi, which says I am fine. Now, if you want to say good morning or good day, you say Alin Puchai or Alin Puchao, which is good morning or good day. Now, good afternoon is Alin Chisi. That sounds Zulu. Alin Chisi lang. At night, Alin Chisi is very long because at night there's no sun. At night, but if you want to say good afternoon, you say Alin Chisi. Good night is Alin Tuta. Good night, Alin Tuta. Asking a name, Iman Sutikio. What's your name? Or what is your name? Iman Sutikio. Now, if you want to say until the next time or want to say farewell, you said Tupanachiskama, Tupanachiskama, Tupanachiskama. That is farewell or until next time. Tupanachiskama, Tupanachiskama, Tupanachiskama. So we usually actually look at the language, the history, the tradition, and then we end by actually trying to learn common greetings. Common greetings. So, for instance, a general respectful greeting used at a time of the day is Imainalam, Imainalam. Then a formal hello used to acknowledge someone is Remai Kulaiki, Remai Kulaiki. Then another formal variation of hello or greeting to you is Nepai Kulaiki. How are you is Alilanchu, Alilanchu. If you want to say I'm fine is Alilan me, Alilan me. Good day, good morning is Alin Punchai, Alin Punchai. Good night is Alin Tuta, Alin Tuta. Now, beyond the verbal greetings, the INCAS society was governed by a central moral code that served as a foundational principle of social interaction. The INCA motto is Amasua, Amalula, Amakwela, do not steal, do not lie, do not be lazy. So Amasua, do not steal, Amalula, do not lie, Amakwela, do not be lazy. Now, those were the INCA mottos to actually encourage people not to commit. Actually, that sounds like some of the 10 commandments of Moses. Do not steal, do not lie, do not murder, do not commit adultery, and so on and so forth. But in this instance, is do not steal, do not lie, do not be lazy. Because if you are not lazy, you will not see a necessity to steal, because you can actually work for yourself. Now, farewell is one of the most common ways to say goodbye in Tupanachiskama, which translates until we meet again. Tupanachiskama, until we meet again. A pronto piacere. Tupanachiskama. A farewell to everyone. It's been a wonderful time that I've had with you. We've learned a lot about the INCAS people, their origin, their culture, and everything that revolves around them. It's so said that they were actually conquered by the Europeans, and then it saw the INCAS kingdom fall. So that's very, very actually sad. But there are still ruins present till this day that actually showed the civilization of that kingdom. It was early 1500s, but if you look at their civilization, built off of rocks, it's pretty amazing. It's beautiful scenery, beautiful sights. I think if you want to go there, you can actually reflect and refresh your mind. You can actually reset being in those spaces. That's what I've seen or what I've consumed from the screen, just looking at those ruins. So it's been very, very interesting learning from them. But I think they have their roots stemming from Africa, looking at their religious practices and how they build their structures. Their engineering truly reminds me of how the ancient Africans used to build, especially if you look at the pyramids of Giza. So the INCAS people are truly African descendants who actually parted when there was an Egyptian conquest during probably 8th century. That's what I add to the story, because when I read them, I actually could see myself from them, and that translates to the rest of Africa. Thank you everyone for tuning in. This is 40 languages, 40 cultures in 40 days. This was day 4. We looked at the INCA people. Actually, there's a person who actually suggested that on the chat yesterday. I forgot his name because he's not with us here today. I would have loved if he was here. So tomorrow we are checking Urdu from Palestine, because we are going Pakistan, because we are going to Asia. Our first stop will be Pakistan, because we have a lot of Pakistanis or Pakistan O's in this chat. But I was hoping, let's do that over the weekend. But during the week, I will try and see if I can find a Pakistan O in South Africa who actually speak Urdu and understand the culture of the Urdu people. But thank you, everyone. I love you so much. Don't forget to smash this up. Tonight, there's a game that's playing that I will actually analyze the game of in Morocco versus Senegal. That's the final of the AFCON 2025 in Morocco. Morocco are the home side, and they are the favorites. And actually, I think if I would bet for the Moroccans. But this is football; anything can happen. That game is playing tonight, I think at 6. I can't wait to watch that one and actually do the analysis of that game and post it over here. You can check out our content. At least they didn't win, bro. But I have to admit, they really had a good run. It's just that when I saw that lineup against Morocco, I knew that they weren't going to win that game. I saw it, and I called it out. And as I've said, that the best thing they can do is to drag this game to penalty and hope Nobali save one penalty, and then they had to score all the penalties. Nobali did his best. He saved the penalty, but they missed. Hence, they lost. So, yeah. At least they are not number one, because if they were number one, Nigerians would be all over us as South Africans. So, hard luck to them. But we will witness today the final. Actually, they played yesterday for the losers final. They won against Egypt, I think, on penalties. That was the losers final. So they got the bronze medal. Kudos to them. But I love everybody. Don't forget to smash this up. Check out our content. Have your comments. We will see you on the next stream. I love you. Pronto piacere. Tupana chiskama. Peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. Nisaligahle siyanithanda. Papayin bafowethu, papayin.